Napoleon's meteoric rise and precipitous fall proved, beyond doubt, that money is not merely about cold numbers. It is, fundamentally, about belief. It is about profound psychology, about meticulous control, and about raw power, the invisible foundation upon which civilization itself precariously rests. And when that vital foundation is allowed to rest on the shifting sands of debt, instead of the unyielding bedrock of discipline, collapse, inevitably, becomes a foregone conclusion. Perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but always. Today, when governments casually print trillions at the merest stroke of a key, when economies inflate precariously on credit bubbles and ephemeral political promises, when markets cheer not genuine production but mere liquidity, we are not, in truth, inventing anything remotely new. We are simply living, unknowingly perhaps, inside Napoleon's enduring machine. The debt system he so innovatively pioneered never truly ceased. It merely shed its uniforms, changed its flags, and adopted new names. The Banque de France evolved into the fundamental model for the modern central bank. The British pound, which ultimately defeated his financial vision, paradoxically became the model for the mighty dollar. And the seductive illusion that boundless prosperity can be manufactured out of mere paper and collective trust became the unquestioned creed of the entire world. And somewhere, perhaps, if history possesses a memory, Napoleon is still smiling, a knowing glint in his eye, understanding that the empire he could not forcefully keep by military might still, in its essence, rules the world by finance. Because the modern banking system was not born in an era of peace and gentle progress. It was forged in the crucible of war, on the bloody battlefields of Europe, under the immense weight of boundless ambition, insatiable greed, and unwavering belief. And that, unequivocally, laid the enduring groundwork for the entire modern financial world, for sophisticated markets, for government bonds, for the intricate international banking network that still wields immense influence from London, New York, and beyond. After Waterloo, Napoleon's personal debts were astronomical. He left behind a mountain of unpaid bills to suppliers, unpaid salaries to countless soldiers, and a litany of grand promises that no empire, however vast, could ever hope to fulfill. He died in lonely exile on the remote island of St. Helena, surrounded by a mere handful of loyal followers, dictating his memoirs to anyone who would listen. But his most profound legacy was not his celebrated battles, nor his sweeping conquests, nor even his dramatic downfall. It was the enduring architecture of money that he left indelibly behind. For even in chains, his brilliant blueprint lived on, the audacious fusion of political will and centralized financial control. The revolutionary idea that nations could effectively spend tomorrow's money to decisively win today's wars, and the potent belief that debt, if properly managed, could fuel seemingly endless growth. That very belief, profoundly, defines our contemporary world. Today, every modern government readily borrows vast sums to sustain its myriad promises. Every central bank prints money with a single stroke of a key to avert perceived collapse. Every nation steadfastly believes it can manage its burgeoning debt indefinitely. That, as long as confidence holds firm, the complex machine will continue its relentless hum. But history, like an ancient oracle, whispers the very same warning that Napoleon so tragically ignored. Every empire meticulously constructed on borrowed trust inevitably meets the same stark end. Not with a cataclysmic invasion, not with a violent revolution, but with a chilling silence. The profound silence that inevitably follows when faith, at long last, runs out. All this was achieved while artfully maintaining the illusion of independence. It was the perfect paradox, a state-backed institution ostensibly serving the public good, yet ultimately serving the interests of its rulers. Prussia swiftly copied its model. Austria studiously examined its workings. Russia openly envied its efficiency. Even across the vast Atlantic, the nascent United States meticulously observed and learned. By the mid-19th century, virtually every major power had constructed its own bespoke version of this Napoleonic hybrid of centralized power and pervasive credit. But the greatest and most ironic beneficiary of this struggle was not France. It was Britain. For the relentless financial struggle with Napoleon had compelled Britain to perfect its own unique financial weapon. While Napoleon's empire spectacularly crumbled, Britain's debt-based system not only endured, but thrived magnificently. By 1815, British government bonds were universally regarded as being as good as gold. Its mighty navy reigned supreme across the seas, ensuring that vital trade routes and burgeoning tax revenues flowed uninterrupted. Its enterprising merchants financed global commerce on an unprecedented scale. Its pound sterling became the undisputed currency of international trade, the world's very first true reserve currency. Napoleon had passionately dreamed of continental domination. Britain, astonishingly, achieved global domination, not through bloody battlefields, but through the sober power of its balance sheets. The pound became the unwavering anchor of the world economy, and the Bank of England, its pulsing heartbeat. In a cruel twist of historical irony, Napoleon's very brand of financial warfare inadvertently created his enemy's ultimate victory. His relentless debt machine had forced London to innovate relentlessly, to stabilize its markets profoundly, and to place its unwavering trust in robust institutions rather than charismatic individuals. Soldiers were increasingly paid with money that had lost its intrinsic value. Supplies were severely rationed, pay was frequently delayed, and morale plummeted dangerously. When he launched his catastrophic invasion of Russia, he was not merely leading men. He was leading a desperate financial fantasy directly into the unforgiving snow. The campaign collapsed with spectacular and horrifying swiftness, and with it, the empire's last remaining line of credit evaporated. France's paper money lost all credibility. Merchants steadfastly refused to accept government notes. The Banque de France, once the crown jewel of his reforms, was reduced to a state of utter desperation, scrambling to borrow from private financiers just to maintain a fragile solvency. Even the army quartermasters began issuing their own rudimentary local scrip to keep essential trade alive. Napoleon, the very man who once boldly proclaimed that credit was immortal, was now, in every conceivable sense, utterly bankrupt. His once glorious empire had, quite literally, eaten itself alive. And yet, history, in its peculiar wisdom, rarely erases its architects. For even in crushing defeat, Napoleon's fundamental financial system managed to outlive him. When the ancient monarchies were painstakingly restored after his spectacular fall, they did not dismantle the Banque de France. They, too, understood its inherent power. They grasped that whoever controlled the flow of national credit ultimately controlled the nation itself. So, they wisely preserved it, and indeed, refined it. The Banque de France subsequently became the enduring model for every serious central bank that emerged in its wake. Its ingenious dual structure, part private institution, part government-controlled entity, skillfully balanced political authority with essential financial expertise. It possessed the formidable capacity to issue currency, meticulously manage national debt, stabilize turbulent markets, and, crucially, fund future wars. It was, in his calculating mind, an act of ultimate financial revenge. But empires that rely solely on control invariably underestimate the profound resilience of free markets and independent nations. Britain simply rerouted its extensive trade networks to the Americas, to India, to the vast markets of Asia. Its powerful navy actively enforced these new, far-flung routes. Its enterprising merchants diligently sought out new buyers, and its sprawling colonial empire efficiently filled any supply gaps. Meanwhile, continental Europe, and especially France's reluctant allies, began to suffocate under the punitive blockade. Without access to essential British goods, prices for everything soared uncontrollably. Sugar, coffee, textiles, and iron rapidly transformed from everyday commodities into prohibitive luxuries. Factories shuttered their doors, vital ports lay eerily empty, and entire towns descended into gnawing hunger. Black markets flourished with impunity, smuggling exploded in scale, and pervasive corruption became, quite openly, the unofficial economy of the empire. The continental system, intended to cripple Britain, instead tragically isolated France. By 1810, even Napoleon's closest allies, Holland, Spain, and significant parts of Germany, began surreptitiously breaking his embargo. They ingeniously smuggled British goods through ostensibly neutral ports and liberally bribed French officials to turn a blind eye. Napoleon, consumed by fury, cracked down even harder, issuing stern new decrees, dispatching zealous inspectors, and ruthlessly jailing dissenting merchants. But this draconian repression only served to deepen the systemic rot. The mighty machine was inexorably running out of fuel, and every single gear within it was grinding itself, painfully, to dust. By 1812, the grand illusion was irrevocably shattering. Napoleon's formidable army still marched, but they were now marching on the precarious fumes of credit. The Bank of England, having been founded a full century earlier, evolved into the very heart of a rival empire, one built not upon conquest and coercion, but upon the enduring power of confidence. While Napoleon forcibly compelled nations to fund his ambitions, Britain sagaciously invited investors to profit from her stability. British government bonds, famously known as consols, rapidly became the preeminent safe haven across Europe. Aristocrats, merchants, and even wary foreign rulers channeled vast sums of money into London, implicitly trusting that Britain's unwavering credit would weather any storm that arose. Napoleon's system was, in essence, a dictatorship of finance. Britain's, by contrast, was a democracy of debt, and that fundamental difference ultimately proved decisive. Every war France waged demanded an ever-increasing measure of coercion, a deeper plunge into debt, and an even greater, almost blind, faith in the genius of a single man. Conversely, every war Britain fought served to strengthen its enduring institutions, its formidable navy, its robust markets, and its stable currency. Napoleon ruled by sheer command, Britain by the enduring power of trust. This, then, was the true war, not fought on the fields of Trafalgar or Waterloo, but meticulously contested in the bond markets and on the balance sheets of Europe. The empire capable of borrowing the longest would ultimately survive. The empire capable of issuing paper that others genuinely believed in would, in the end, rule. In 1806, Napoleon attempted to launch a devastating economic counterstrike. He issued the infamous Continental System, a sweeping embargo specifically designed to strangle Britain's vital trade. European nations under his direct control were strictly forbidden from importing any British goods. His conviction was that if he could utterly destroy Britain's commerce, its vital credit system would inevitably collapse alongside it. Spain's vast gold reserves were unceremoniously shipped to Paris. Holland's prosperous merchants were taxed into utter collapse. Each conquest became a mere financial transaction. Each victory, a temporary bailout. The subjugated nations bore the crushing weight of the interest payments, while France enjoyed the fleeting illusion of enduring wealth. And, remarkably, for a few glorious years, this audacious system appeared to function flawlessly. Paris gleamed with new marble edifices. Soldiers were paid punctually, and the French franc, once scorned, was again hailed as a paragon of stability. Napoleon even meticulously constructed new institutions, stock exchanges, customs houses, and mints, to lend an air of unimpeachable legitimacy to his grand financial design. Yet, behind this meticulously polished facade lay a colossal machine held together by nothing more substantial than sheer confidence. The very instant people ceased to believe in it, it was destined to collapse. It was, in every meaningful sense, the very first modern system of monetary imperialism. France did not merely assert its dominance through armies. It ruled through the pervasive power of debt. It actively exported its credit system across Europe, much in the same way America would, generations later, export the dollar. It demanded that its allies borrow exclusively in French currency, conduct their banking through French institutions, and engage in trade strictly on French terms. Money, in Napoleon's grand vision, had become an explicit extension of imperial power. Across the narrow channel, Britain observed these developments with meticulous scrutiny. The British leadership understood precisely what elaborate financial edifice Napoleon was constructing, and they rightfully feared its potential. But they also keenly perceived its inherent weaknesses, and so, they deliberately built something superior. He dictated arbitrary budgets to conquered nations, compelled them to mint his coins, and ordered them to acquire French goods at exorbitantly inflated prices. This was no longer a matter of economics. It had unmistakably become a brutal system of pure extraction. Such an empire, built on relentless extraction, inevitably confronts its limitations. Britain, more than any other nation, understood this immutable truth. The British Royal Navy, unequivocally ruling the waves, ensured one devastating reality for France: an ironclad blockade. This meant no vital gold shipments, no lucrative colonial trade, and no crucial supplies could reach the French mainland. France found itself hermetically sealed on its own continent, rich in martial glory, perhaps, but critically poor in liquidity. Merchants found their cargoes unable to move, factories were crippled by their inability to export goods, and the national treasury found itself utterly unable to balance its books. The debt machine, once so formidable, was now, quite literally, consuming itself. Napoleon's response to this escalating crisis was a display of pure, unadulterated authoritarian genius. He did not retreat. Instead, he defiantly doubled down. He nationalized vast swathes of France's economy, personally dictated interest rates, and wielded his extensive network of prefects to extract taxes with chilling military precision. He seized valuable church lands, confiscated the assets of declared enemies, and even summarily ordered forced loans from his wealthiest citizens. To resist such decrees was to commit treason. When he invaded Austria, his objectives extended beyond mere military victory. He explicitly sought revenue. Following the pivotal Battle of Austerlitz, the Austrians were coerced into paying 40 million francs in reparations, a sum substantial enough to fund another full year of war. When he crushed Prussia, he demanded even more punitive sums. Italy's treasuries were systematically emptied. Finance, in this era, became a second, equally vital battlefield, silent, invisible, yet just as deadly in its efficacy. Napoleon regarded them as both invaluable allies and expendable tools. He once mused, "Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency." Yet, he desperately needed them, and, by the same token, they needed him. Together, they forged a European financial system predicated on perpetual motion, an endless cycle of debt underwritten by an endless pursuit of war. However, this intricate machine possessed a sinister underbelly. Its continued operation hinged entirely on the universal belief that it could, quite simply, never cease. And belief, as history consistently demonstrates, has its breaking point. Napoleon had meticulously crafted something that projected an aura of eternity, an empire fueled by the sheer force of confidence. But confidence, alas, is a most fragile currency. It can purchase precious time, but never immutable truth. And by 1805, that stark truth was rapidly catching up. The Napoleonic Wars were voraciously devouring resources equivalent to billions in today's money: gold, silver, credit, and an unending stream of supplies. The Banque de France, once lauded as the savior of French finance, was now quietly printing paper it could no longer fully back with real assets. Each hard-won victory brought not only new territories, but also a fresh cascade of new costs: armies to provision, shattered cities to rebuild, pensions to disperse, and loans to perpetually renew. The empire was undeniably expanding geographically, but its fundamental financial foundation was insidiously hollowing out from within. Tax revenues proved woefully insufficient to keep pace. The richer provinces, such as Italy, Belgium, and the Rhineland, were mercilessly drained to feed the insatiable war effort. And when even those rich veins ran dry, Napoleon simply demanded more. The Banque answered solely to him, its every policy meticulously engineered to serve the needs of his incessant wars. And thus, with startling speed, money and military became inextricably fused into a single, cohesive system. War, inherently, is an extravagant affair, and Napoleon's ambitious campaigns were nothing short of astronomical in their cost. From the sun-drenched plains of Italy to the frosty reaches of Russia, encompassing Austria and Prussia, he required a ceaseless torrent of funding for weapons, horses, provisions, and countless soldiers. But he did not possess boundless reserves of gold. He had something far more potent: credit. Napoleon perfected a cunning stratagem that modern governments continue to employ to this day, borrowing against the promise of future victories. He issued government bonds, explicitly guaranteeing repayment following successful conquests. Astute merchants and bankers eagerly bought these, placing their fortunes squarely on his anticipated success. Each fresh victory not only expanded his domain, but also bolstered market confidence. Each newly signed treaty invariably pushed the value of those bonds higher. His wars, astonishingly, became self-financing, as long as his triumphant streak continued. It was a self-feeding illusion of boundless prosperity. War begot debt, debt begot money, and money, in turn, fueled more war. And Napoleon, with his brilliant strategic mind, was its undisputed master conductor. Behind him emerged a shrewd new class of financiers who instinctively understood this audacious game. Men like Gabriel Julien Ouvrard and the astute Perregaux brothers, figures who, in essence, functioned as the Rothschilds before the actual Rothschilds rose to prominence. They keenly speculated on Napoleon's military campaigns, vigorously traded in his war bonds, and even orchestrated the clandestine movement of gold across enemy blockades. Thus, he meticulously constructed a system designed to resurrect that crucial belief, not through the mere promise of gold, but through unwavering discipline, astute perception, and absolute control. His very first move was a stroke of psychological genius. He famously declared, "Credit is to money what the soul is to the body." It was a singular statement that encapsulated his profound understanding, for he knew, instinctively, that one could effectively conjure money from pure trust. Hence, in 1800, he formally established the Banque de France, a private institution, yes, but one held firmly and unyieldingly under his personal command. It functioned as both a nascent central bank and an potent propaganda machine, its mission elegantly simple: to restore the public's conviction that French money once again possessed tangible meaning. In stark contrast to the revolutionary financial anarchy that preceded him, Napoleon refrained from deluging the nation with valueless paper. Instead, he introduced a new currency, meticulously backed by physical silver and gold, but perhaps even more importantly, underpinned by the formidable weight of his own authority. Coins now proudly bore his resolute face. France's very money became synonymous with Napoleon himself, and that potent symbolism, unequivocally, worked. The Banque de France promptly began issuing stable banknotes and diligently managing the nation's burgeoning debt, thereby instilling in merchants, soldiers, and ordinary citizens the vital confidence that their earnings would retain their value. For the first time in an arduous decade, France finally boasted a functional financial system. Yet, here lies the unexpected twist. This monumental undertaking wasn't merely about the intricacies of economics. It was, above all, about an unwavering grip on control. Napoleon harbored no desire for a free market. He envisioned a finely tuned machine that he could command absolutely. He conquered half of Europe, yet Napoleon Bonaparte's most formidable weapon wasn't his grand army. It was, surprisingly, debt. While cannons may triumph in battles, it is credit that truly erects empires. And in the nascent years of the 19th century, Napoleon proved himself a master of both disciplines. This is the rarely told narrative of how a once bankrupt general fundamentally transformed France's shattered national finances into a groundbreaking global banking model, a blueprint that continues to shape every modern economy, even today. For long before the towering financial institutions of Wall Street or the International Monetary Fund, there was the intricate financial machinery of Napoleon. France did not begin the 19th century as a burgeoning superpower. Rather, it lay prostrate as a financial corpse. The preceding revolution had systematically dismantled everything: the monarchy, the aristocracy, and, most crucially, the very fabric of its monetary system. By the mid-1790s, France had unleashed such a torrent of paper currency, known as assignats, that they were rendered practically worthless. At one point, the staggering inflation meant one could purchase an entire Parisian house for merely the price of a loaf of bread, provided payment was made in assignats. This rampant inflation had utterly devoured public trust, and trust, fundamentally, is the bedrock of any functioning financial system. When Napoleon seized power in a coup in 1799, he inherited a nation not only bankrupt and exhausted, but also reviled by its exasperated creditors. The populace, weary of perpetual upheaval, yearned desperately for stability. And Napoleon, unlike many of his revolutionary predecessors, grasped a profound truth that genuine power did not solely emanate from muskets. It originated from money that people truly believed in. Napoleon Bonaparte did not merely redraw the political map of Europe. He fundamentally redrew the very map of money itself. And the complex system we inhabit today, of powerful central banks, seemingly infinite debt, and meticulously controlled trust, is, in its deepest reality, the empire he never truly lost. If this perspective offers you a new understanding, remember always that the profound answers are not hidden in the distant future. They are, unequivocally, inscribed in the past.